Welcome to the Secret Keepers podcast with your host, Kareen Zutleger. Join us as we uncover the hidden thoughts, stories, and moments that help bring light to the healing power of truth and examine how silence can affect us mentally, physically, and spiritually. We'll also share profound stories, interviews, and transformative narratives to help release ourselves from the hidden and step into healing towards inner peace, joy, and fulfillment. Now, here's your healing strategist and host, Kareen.
Welcome to the Secret Keepers podcast. And today I have the beautiful Linda Wilson, and I'm so excited to bring my friend here for all of you to experience. And Linda, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Oh my, thank you, Corinne. Thanks for having me. This is so exciting. We've we've known each other for quite a while, and this is fun to be able to spend so much time with you. Yay. Um,
Yay.
Gosh, a little bit about me. I'm a coach, mentor, speaker, and I know for your show, my trauma is a different kind of trauma. So my trauma is health related, and just loss related, and
Mhm.
it's still trauma. So
Absolutely.
I don't compare, but it's
Mhm.
probably a little bit different than what your usual guests talk about. Because I had a wonderful childhood and I've had a wonderful adult life, but you know, challenges get in the way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's just it, right? There is no so we have generational trauma, and then we have trauma that occurs in our everyday life that affects us, right? That significant emotional event that can trigger a spiral and kind of a cascade of things that happen within our body, and really having the conversations about like what that looks like. So tell the audience, Linda, some of the different things that you have experienced that have um, definitely shown up within your body over the course of your adult life.
Okay, well, I had an aortic dissection, and it's
Okay, so for
been,
the audience who may not know what that is, can we talk,
um,
just tell
you
them what
bet.
that is?
If any of you remember John Ritter, it's what he died from. It's where
Yeah.
the aorta, which is the main blood supply to your entire body, and it runs through your whole body, it splits.
Oh,
And most of the time, at least back when I had mine, if you're not getting immediate attention and know what it is, you kind of bleed out. Um, and it keeps splitting. So when I had mine, I was at an art fair and I was walking around with a friend of mine, and I thought I was having a heart attack because it just popped me to my knees. And because I was with someone and help was just down the street, even though they couldn't diagnose it for 9 hours, I was being watched and they were able to mitigate it getting worse. And that required open heart surgery to fix. So at 49, I had open heart surgery. And because I felt so good afterwards, I was young, I was in good shape, I was physically
yeah.
fit, and I was very active. I went right back to doing what I always did. And I created a blood clot in my neck that went all down my
My.
back. And another, 8 weeks out, because I had to stop doing what I was doing, let that absorb. And then I had to learn my
Mm.
lesson that I couldn't do that anymore. And when they did another repair, I had another open heart surgery. I was so limited to what I could do that I just stopped. I was a photographer, so that was what was feeding me life. And I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't carry my stuff around my neck. I couldn't carry the weight. I was restricted to 5 pounds lifting. And,
Wow.
for any of you, 5 pounds, that's not even a gallon of milk. A gallon of milk
Right.
is considered a 10-pound lift. So I couldn't do any of the things that I was used to doing. And my husband's like, well, you you could go back to work. And I said, office work requires you being able to lift more than 5 pounds. And he says, well, what do you mean? And I said, a ream of paper to fill the printer is 5 pounds.
Yes.
I
That's the thing you
said,
don't think about, right? I mean,
right. And I said,
yeah,
so, my background was IT. I used to repair computers. I used to carry computers all over the place. I had an admin background, but that wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. And looking for work that would allow for me, I mean, they're technically not allowed to not hire you for those reasons, but if they can hire someone that can do the full job versus hiring me and having a bunch of people help me do my job, it makes sense for them to hire someone else. And,
sure. Yeah.
so then I went into this spiral of depression because I felt like I wasn't, what good am I? What can I do? I can't do anything.
So
And
so you had to make a whole shift, right? So what I
I
hear
had to
you
make a
saying
complete
is,
shift. Yeah.
yeah, that, because typically what I ask is, how did this affect you spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally? I'm hearing it ran the gamut, right?
Right.
So yeah, talk to us from that place. So here you are having to make a complete shift, and now you're experiencing, very low
energy
energy and depression.
I went into grief, and my husband was the most amazing man. Um, he did have a psychology background, so I think he understood some of the things I
Sure.
was going through. He never pushed. He never made me feel less than, which was
That's
so
amazing.
important, so important.
Hmm.
And he was extremely patient with me, and he allowed me to find my way. And so since I couldn't do the regular kind of things, I tried a lot of different things. I was working with a couple in a network marketing group, and they were amazing. But that second surgery paralyzed one of my vocal cords, and I couldn't talk.
Oh no. Oh
I mean,
no.
really, how much of my story do you want? It's a litany.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think it's important for people to
yeah,
hear the whole thing, right? Because it
yeah,
was a series of significant emotional events that took you into the place that you were at. Um,
yeah. And I couldn't talk. It takes about 18 months to determine whether a vocal cord is just damaged or if it's paralyzed for good. Um, and so for 18 months, you would have never heard me at this volume. And to speak at this volume, I was screaming. My whole body was involved in
wow.
trying to be heard. And this was in like around 2011, 2012. And, the voice activated menus on the phone was a big thing. And so, Jeff would be at work and I'd be at home trying to take care of normal things, and I would call and I could never get through the voice menu. It was so frustrating. I would text Jeff at
Yeah.
work and I would say, when you have a few minutes, call me. I need you to help me get through, like, to Comcast or to Excel or whoever I was calling. And I said, because it's a voice menu and I can't I can't get through it. I would be in tears. My whole body ached, and I felt very invisible. And it was really difficult. And that went on for a good 18 months.
Right. So
And
isolated, right? You're very,
I was
really
extremely isolated.
isolated.
And my upline was so wonderful because they would make calls with me. They would go on my meetings with prospective clients with me. And what would happen was is that while I was trying to talk, if the effort became too great, everything in my head opened up and I would start choking and gagging.
Oh,
And when that would happen, I would just look at one of them. I would leave the room and go, get sick or whatever was going to come from it until I could clear all that out. And they would just keep working with the client. And they did it without making me feel like I was a burden. They did it without making me feel like I was different or it was a weird thing. They just did it. And they were so helpful in that way. I don't think I would have lasted in that business nearly as long as I tried to because I couldn't have done it without their help.
So I can hear, I hear the kindness and the love that was coming from them because they could see that, you know, this was something that was affecting you, you know, complete circle, right? That
Right.
in
And
in the
yeah, and my husband saw it as well. And except for my close family and friends, I was embarrassed to go anywhere. I didn't want, because what if I start choking? I mean, you could hear it all, you know how
yeah.
it is. And I thought I was disgusting. So I didn't
Mm,
want to go do things.
sure. Can hear that mental chatter in there,
Yeah.
right? Talking to yourself like that.
And I used to do happy hours and stuff with all my friends, and we do networking happy hours and stuff, and I quit going because I couldn't be heard. You know, I in a large room of people, there wasn't any way anybody could hear what I was saying. So I just found myself sitting in a corner and I thought, well, this is dumb. So I just quit going, you know.
Oof. And then so more isolation, right? Because so
Right.
here you are, right? And then you're frustrated, you're isolated, your body is trying to heal. Um, but the longer that takes, right? I mean, I can tell because I know you're a mover and a shaker. And so having to
Well,
be patient, right? Having to be patient with this physical body as it heals.
and I
Um,
was I was definitely very visible back then. Um, I led
mm,
the largest women's business networking organization in the state of Colorado. I was their president for a year. And I thrived on the energy of being in the room with those people. And once that happened, that all fell away because
oof.
even with the microphone, they couldn't hear me. And by then I had stepped down because I knew I was having that second surgery. So I thought, well, I need to, we planned it for after I was done being in charge, but it just it made me feel invisible. And then
Yeah,
and then when it got really gross like that, I was really happy being invisible. I didn't want anybody to see me like that. You know,
yeah.
I
Sure.
wanted to be seen, but not like that, right? You
Sure.
know,
And here's like so much of your identity was wrapped into, you know, being this person of service and leading in this role of leadership and commanding being able to command the room. And now you don't have the voice to command the room, nor the wherewithal, the energy. So, you know, and then the mental chatter is getting louder.
it
Yeah.
was it was just, you know, it was just ridiculous. And a lot of that I put on myself. I
Sure.
did not have people
Hmm.
telling me it was disgusting to be around me or to leave the room
Right.
because it was gross. That was all me internalizing.
Yes. Hmm.
And we know that our thoughts are energy,
Right.
but you don't realize the power they have.
Mm.
I don't think of it when I think of things and it goes right. That connection never hit as powerfully as when I would think things and they would go wrong because I was thinking and I was living in that energy and that's what I got and that's what I
Mhm.
created. And when I look back now, it's kind of like, yeah, that's what that power means. It's not
Yeah.
deciding whether it's good for you or not. It's just saying this equals you. Here it comes.
Right, the amplitude, right? So
Yeah,
the vibration of the word, we
right.
don't pay attention to the word really sometimes, especially when we're talking to ourselves. So that inner critic can get so loud. And then if I'm in there and I'm hating on me, if energetically sending those impulses out to attract more of that sort of level of energy, which then just it can cascade into something so much bigger. And I hear you when you're saying like, well, I didn't really, when things were good, we just, things are just good and they're humming along and we don't really think too much about it. But then when things aren't good, we start to even pile more on ourselves. And I hear you that you were doing that, right? You're just like this is disgusting. And so if I talk to myself that way, vibrationally, I'm sending that out, and then I'm going to attract something in at that level, and or block, right?
Yeah.
Right, kick that hose, block off that goodness. Maybe not necessarily attract in a negative thing, but now
But
I've
I wasn't leaving
put to,
any room
hmm
for the good to come. And,
yeah,
it even affected my relationship with Jeff a lot
okay.
because I worried about being intimate with him and in the middle of everything having one of those spells.
Oh,
So I withdrew from
oh,
him
that
that
just
way.
gave me goosebumps. And that just gave
And
me goosebumps. Mm,
and I know that he knew that. We never verbalized it, but I know he knew that because he never pushed. But
right.
I do feel like it affected us in that way, very much so, because how could anyone love me when I was so disgusting?
Oh, oh,
You know? And so
ah,
it's really hard.
oh. Mm,
The trauma that has come into my life, some of it, it's just life. But what I did with that made it so much more, so much
sure.
worse. And so now, as I'm coming forward out of all of the things I've been through in my life, I'm learning to turn that trauma into something of a blessing.
And we see the gift, right? How did
Receive
I
the gift.
learn
And I
and
know sometimes that's
grow?
really
Yeah.
hard, you
Yeah.
know,
Right.
but
Especially in the thick of it. Right. We're not
yeah,
talking
it's like,
about like when you're knee
where's the
deep in
gift in
it,
this, right?
right? It can be difficult, to say like, oh yeah, having this major heart issue or having a blood clot or losing my husband could be, that there could be some sort of gift in this. And yet I hear you saying you could see it, you see it now, right? You see that these
Right.
things happened, and then the way you treated you were the bully to you, right?
Oh
You were
yeah,
the BD to you, right?
if I talked to my
Yeah,
friends the way I talk to myself, I wouldn't have any friends, you know.
right, exactly. Yeah, and that's
You
a
know,
big thing, that as a population we deal with, because that inner critic is loud and it comes from different spaces, right? Because there's rules and roles and expectations, and then there's, we pull in and give things meaning, and we start to look around to the left and to the right instead of looking inward at what is the truth of who I am and whose I am, and really gleaning in knowing and trusting that, right, everything in there is good, and when you're beating yourself up.
oh yeah,
Mm,
I am always my harshest critic, and I think most people are
mm,
their own harshest critic.
sure. Hmm.
And I went through a variety of things after that. When I decided to get the vocal cord implant so that I could talk normally, um, super simple day surgery, except nothing is super simple with me. I have issues
Ah,
with anesthesia and things, and
sure.
so instead of it being a day surgery, I aspirated and got pneumonia.
Oh my goodness.
I actually died. They had to resuscitate me.
Mm.
And in that process, they had to reintubate me. And that surgical equipment had a superbug on it, which is something that is resistant to the sterilization process. It's not negligence on the part of the hospital or the medical facility. It's something that has morphed and that stuff doesn't kill it. And you don't know it's there. So I
That's
ended up,
so
I know.
oh,
So I ended up spending
oh,
5 months in ICU isolation. And this was before COVID. So I didn't have any real understanding of what that would be like, what that meant. My family didn't really understand what that looked like, what that meant. And I was in and out of consciousness a lot. I don't remember most of it, but I do know that I was in ICU isolation because I was contagious. And I started to feel like a pariah because once they realized that I had this thing and it was contagious, or they thought, they weren't sure how it passed. Um, everybody had to be gowned and masked to come in and visit me. And
Sure.
much of my family and friends are immunocompromised, so they could no longer come up and see me. And Jeff watched me withdraw from life. And when he came up to see me, against all of their wishes, and sometimes he just pushed past them at the door, he would come in, he would hold my hand, he would kiss my forehead, he would look me in the eye, face to face, to make sure that I got human contact, because I was not having any skin to skin contact. I mean,
Yeah.
think about hospitals in general.
Sure.
Everybody, if they're doing something with you, they've got gloves on
Sure.
because,
Hmm.
you know, and so he realized that I was really withdrawing within myself, and he made sure that I did not. And,
Ooh.
you know,
Now that's love, right? That's the
yeah.
truest essence of love.
And they're
There
like,
is.
you can't come in that way. You might catch it. He says, I don't care. He says, I'm not afraid of her. She's my wife.
Oh my goodness.
And he said, she's fading away. And he came in and he would do that. And he worked a job that, because of the time of year I got sick, he could pretty much do his work whenever. And
Yeah.
so, he was getting to that age where if he woke up in the middle of the night, he was up anyway. So at 2 or 3 in the morning, he would go into work and he
Mhm.
would work his shift, get his, he was salaried, but he'd go in and he'd work and he'd get his stuff done. And then he would come up and see me. And he would
Wow.
sit with me and we'd have dinner if I was awake, and we'd talk. And
Mm.
then he would come home and he would do, either mow the lawn or shovel snow, whatever was going on. He had everything around the house to take care of. He was trying to figure out how to pay bills because I did all of that. And he didn't know. I'm not sure how he figured it out because I had all the passwords, everything were right up
Oh,
here.
we would have that problem here as well. So,
And I do
yeah.
know that one of the times, I think one of the times that I was awake and coherent, he got enough information from me to get into the computer and figure it out. And then when I came to and it looked like I was, going to be stable for a week, after a week, he brought the computer up to this to the rehab center, and I went in and I showed him how to
Oh,
pay everything online, or at least put everything onto automatic bill pay, so that he didn't have to worry about it. And this was 2015, 2016, and I left everything on automatic bill pay ever since because we weren't going to have that problem again.
right.
So then
Hmm.
you look at the things that you do that you might not have done before because of what you've been through.
Absolutely.
And so we set up our household to be illness proof because Jeff had his own health issues. And once I came home and I was doing better, if you want to see how trauma affects your body, Jeff had always had intestinal problems. It was something that was hereditary, and our son has it as well. But I think the stress of him trying to keep me alive, keep me safe, keep the household going, keep everything going for that 5 months showed up in he was no longer able to absorb nutrition. And so
Okay.
he was constantly anemic. He was constantly
Mm.
losing blood, but not in the way that they figured he would lose blood.
Uh-huh.
And so it got to for 18 months, 4 days a week, I drove him to the infusion center. His work set him up so he could take his laptop, and he worked from the infusion center for 4 hours a day. And he 4 days a week he got albumin infusions, and then the last day he got um, iron infusions. And he would do that for 4 hours in the morning, and then I'd go pick him up and take him to work so he wouldn't have to pay to park downtown. And he worked from the infusion center, and we did that for 18 months. And when
Wow.
they realized that that wasn't working, they gave him a choice. They said, you can do this forever, or we can remove your stomach because it's just too damaged. So he chose to have his stomach removed. It's kind of like, what they would do when people were losing weight, and only instead of tying everything off, they just removed it because it was damaged.
Okay. Okay.
And he did pretty good with that for a while. And then, but he also had an artificial heart valve from an earlier illness, and he was on blood thinner. And I came home one day and found him, and he was still alive. I thought maybe he had just had he was borderline pre-diabetic, so I thought maybe he had had an insulin thing while I was at work.
Okay.
Found out that he had a massive brain hemorrhage, and because he was on blood thinner, I don't know how long he had been laying there before I got home. So
Mm.
the trauma, I think, of what we went through me, I think had a huge effect on his health afterwards.
Sure. I mean, I can see it. I can see how, right, because how it affects us. If he's not
Yeah.
sleeping right, he's not eating right, he's concerned for you and your well-being, all that additional stress, right, releases that cortisol, which affects, every aspect of our body. So it would completely make sense that it put stress on him as well. Um, and yet it is still important, right, for you to know that, um, like, it's not your fault,
No, I know.
right? Yeah.
It took a long time. I've got survivor's guilt from some other things, but that one I was finally able to know that that wasn't my fault. Um,
Mhm.
it was the price we paid for him loving me. Because if he
Oh,
didn't love me, he wouldn't have had that reaction.
sure.
And
So,
so when we talk about giving ourselves grace and giving each other grace through these things,
mhm.
we have to remember that all of this is different types of energy, and it's going to have an obvious effect on us, whether we choose to see what that effect is, or if we choose to think it's just something that happens naturally.
Yeah.
Which means
What kept you afloat? Like, let's talk about,
what kept me afloat. Yeah.
yeah, all of these things happened, and yet here you are today, you know, you're telling your story, you're helping other people, you're in leadership, y- you're making a difference in adding value into other people's lives.
Thank you.
How do you get from holy cow, all of this life stuff to where you are today?
Well, to be honest, after he died, I did not handle it well. But one of the things that really helped me, especially when I couldn't talk, was my aunt had a cousin of theirs make me a God box. And you and I talked about the God box before. And,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a seamless box with a little slit in the top, and you write out whatever is worrying you, whatever you're thankful for, whatever it is, and you put it on a piece of paper and you put it in the God box and you release it to God. And since I couldn't verbally I was trached for a long time, before they even would take it out during the day. I just wasn't able to talk. And so that was a way for me to write down my fears, my frustrations, also my wins and my thank yous and the things that I was grateful for and lived in gratitude for. And I stuffed them in that box, and I stuffed that
Yeah.
box full. And that was one way I could do it because I couldn't verbalize it.
Sure.
Um, and if you go out and you look at Amazon or any of those places, they have a version of that God box. You can just Google God box and you can
Yeah.
find a ton of them. And that was really helpful for me. One of the other things that really worked for me is I reconnected to my group. Um, reconnected with Paul and got reconnected with Empowered Living, which was very helpful. And I started reading empowering books. And one of the ones that
Yeah.
really helped me snap out of it was Viktor Frankl's
Uh,
book.
A Man
Because,
Search for Meaning, that one.
yes.
Yeah.
And, I read that and I thought, okay, and you should never compare what you're going through with what someone else is going
Sure.
through. Everybody's journey is unique and personal.
Mhm.
But I thought, what I'm going through is nothing compared to what
Right.
the man went through and what those people went through. And I thought, God didn't bring you this far to give up. And
Really reaching inside. You sorry, I hear you saying, right? You're really connecting into your
yeah,
faith and knowing, right, that there's a purpose. There's a purpose behind everything. And when we stand in that power, when we stand in our power of knowing, right, that that faith and the trust and the tapping into the intuition and our direct connection to God and saying, like, show me how this serves. It keeps us it keeps us moving forward, right? Taking the actions, taking those steps forward. And like I just keep hearing you say, right, like you knew, somewhere inside of you there was this knowing that there had to be some sort of deeper meaning to all of this. And of course we give everything meaning. um and recognizing too that staying stuck in that depressive state or staying stuck in that self-guilting and self-beating, that wasn't getting you anywhere, certainly wasn't productive, and it wasn't healthy.
no, I
But
mean,
you
I was curled up on the couch for 18 months.
Yeah,
I mean, that was
it's
not, and
mm,
one of the other things that I have that I know a lot of people don't have is I have the most amazing support system. And,
that's awesome.
I've got family, I've got friends, I've got people from the empowered living community. I mean, people I've never met in
Mm,
person prayed for me. And
yeah.
I had my mom. And I swear, from her
Mm.
lips to God's ears, I'm putting mom up for sainthood. She
Ah,
she was and still is, even though she's gone, a powerhouse. Um, she just constantly prayed. And she had such a circle of friends that, if mom put out the word, say, just send prayer, she wouldn't even have to tell them who it was or what it was for. Boom.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's how I believe I got through as far as I did.
Certainly
And
a powerful energy behind prayer, right?
oh,
Especially
yeah,
connecting when, because we are, right? We're one, we are all one, we're a collective. And, what I want for me, when I also want that for you, right? And so sending that love, that loving message, lifting up the healing for you and saying, I see this and I envision this for you. And it's so powerful.
it is. And, you know, when my brother passed, mom was like, oh, she said, I always just pray for it to be what God wants it to be and what's
Mm,
going to be the best. And she said, sometimes that means I have to let go. And my
Mhm.
brother passed from an aortic dissection. And so
Okay. Oh,
survivor
wow.
skills
Ooh,
started big there for me.
sure.
But he was home alone for several hours. He came home from work, let the dog out, and hit the floor.
That was it.
Um, but he survived and fought really hard for 3 months. And I remember just thinking, why are they taking him? He's the rock. He's the one that helps mom and dad with
Mm.
all the heavy lifting. My sister did as well, but she was working, and he would do all the heavy stuff that my dad would try to do that my sister couldn't convince my dad not to do, but my brother could. you, you know,
Uh-huh.
so he was 90 when he passed. So
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
he had his
Yeah.
own, he had his own way of doing things. I loved my dad. But it's just been this journey of taking what comes to me. I mean, most of that was well beyond my control.
Right.
But how I responded to it, I definitely could have controlled better. And it's what I'm putting into practice now and seeing the difference it makes when I take that pause and say, okay, this is what's going down now. No
Well,
need
and look at
to
the
react.
learning in there though, right? Because
Yeah.
we can also be kind of hard on ourselves in regards to well, I should have known better or I could have did better. And the reality of it is that you needed to have that human experience in order for you to, like, and I air quote this, take it to the
Mhm.
streets, right? So
Right.
you experienced, what it was like to feel that and react that way so that you can now be a model and show and help and guide, right? So that's what we do as we coach and we mentor and we guide and
Mhm.
we some people use the term healer, and it's not that we do the healing, but we help people guide themselves through that healing process, right? And that's because we've experienced things. And I think, well, if it would all went perfectly,
What would be the experience in
right,
that?
would be
There's no
exactly.
learning in perfection.
No.
And that has been one of the hardest things for me to deal with. Um,
It would be easy, like smooth
yeah.
sailing, right?
Mhm.
Perfection, and perfectionism is simply it's a coping thing, right? And
Yeah.
um, but it's not a reality. There is no perfection in that, every day, right? We're here, right? That spiritual
Mhm.
being living in this physical body, right? We're having this human experience because that's why we're here, and here
Well,
to help each other,
and
not
that's
beat up on each other.
and that's part of the joy of the human experience
Yeah,
is
exactly.
getting to meet people who are not like us
Mm,
and interact and learn from them.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you know, I remember right after 9/11, our next door neighbor worked we have a Air Force base not too far from us here. And he worked at the base. And I remember first off thinking how quiet everything got because the plane stopped. And then pretty soon, the Air Force Base had the jets flying and patrolling. And so that was kind of scary. And then
Sure.
we also had, during that stretch, we had a big blizzard and he needed to get to the base. And so the entire neighborhood came out because even the plows were getting stuck. I mean, it was just massive. And the entire neighborhood came to dig the guy out so he could get out and get to the base to serve.
At the
And
power of community.
the power of community. And when we
Yeah.
look around, I live in a very
Mhm.
diverse neighborhood. And so to see that we've got people from Nigeria, we've got people from Kenya, from India, from Pakistan, from Iran,
Mm,
Iraq. We've got people from Europe. We've got people from the UK. I love my neighborhood because we're a little
yeah.
mini melting pot.
Hmm.
And everybody was out there and,
Right. Just
you know,
living as community and living in,
right. And it's like doing
yeah,
what we need to do to keep everybody safe. And
I love that.
that's where we learn. And
Yeah,
now
absolutely.
yeah, now the neighbors that live next door, they're Muslim, and for their holidays, they bring us over a plate of whatever they're serving. And I
Oh,
just
I
think
love
that is
that.
so, you know, and
Yeah.
not asking for anything in return. They just say, our holiday started today. Would you like something to,
And
so
just to share, right?
just
And
to
to have
share.
that, that experience of, somebody else's culture. We love that too. We've been
Yeah,
traveling with our kids since they were younger and really taking them to see the world so that they would have an understanding of what it really looks like out there. Because we can be, we can sometimes, if I'm only walking in one lane,
right,
I don't necessarily get to see what's really truly out there. And what a gift, right? What a gift to be able to have all the experience to experience all the culture that you get to experience. And um I want to, you have just shared so much with us that, I mean, that's like just so power packed. Um, what I would love for you to do is talk just a little bit about that healing and transformation process that you went through. So, you did some things that helped you get to this space where you are right now.
right. And one of the things I did was reach out, and I got some help, mental health help from a therapist. She's amazing, amazing. And
Wonderful.
she helped me because I wanted something other than just sitting and talking about, you know, woe is me. She's
I'm
very
sure.
she's very scientific based, and she gave me exercises, you know, things to do that would help lift my energy and bring me out of that state. And that was super, super important to how I came out of it. Again, a support system, even if you don't have a great big one, someone you trust that will allow you to be you, but not allow you to wallow in self-pity.
Right. No victim.
No victim, very important.
Yeah.
Um, I read, I read a lot. I read Viktor Frankl's book. I read Harry Belafonte's book. I read Michelle Obama's book.
Okay.
Um, I just read books that spoke to me about ways to overcome whatever's going on. And I did a lot of work with making sure I tried, not to do everything in a reactionary mode. Um, Sometimes, it's a reaction, so you can't stop it, but you don't have to live in it. So
Right.
if I had that knee-jerk reaction, I would acknowledge it, and then I would step back and say,
Mm.
okay, now got that out of your system.
What's that really about?
Yeah. What would be a better way to address this?
Yeah.
And that was so important because I didn't want to be a burden on my family, and I felt very much a
Mm.
burden.
Okay.
And they didn't make me feel a burden again. I had to reframe my thoughts.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so I just put myself through the mental work, the personal professional development work to learn how to think differently
Yeah.
and
That's awesome.
to rearrange how I looked at things. One of my big things that I talk about is perspective, and it was
Right.
just making
Yes.
myself step back and get a different perspective on things.
And really rewiring the brain, right? Because
Yeah,
now, you've had this pattern of thinking and it's going to the left and it's going to the left. And we do have that ability to rewire our brain, and it is neuroplastic. And so we can change things. People, there was a belief, lots of years ago that it was, your mindset was fixed. And once, you had something, it was just part of who you are. And what they're finding is so amazing, right? We have that ability to change our brain and literally change our whole body chemistry, at a cellular level. But that is for another podcast episode for us to dive deep into that. Um,
right.
Linda, how I really love to ask all of my guests, through everything that you've been through, what wisdom have you gained by um, literally bringing your secret to light, to addressing that, you know, th- the self-talk and, all of the things that have happened to you. Um, what wisdom have you gained through everything that you've been through that you can share with us?
I think the wisdom that I gained is that everything in my life has happened the way it was supposed to happen, and that I brought it to be. And even the stuff that wasn't good, I brought it to be for a reason that maybe I haven't figured out yet, but it's part of what I needed to go through to become who I am and to become who I'm going to continue to become. It's all part of that, it's part of my DNA. And, it's funny, people always go, oh, if you could go back and change anything, I'm like, no, absolutely not. And they're like, really? I'm like, would I love for Jeff to still be here? Would I love for my parents to still be here? Yes. But if I change one thing, everything else after that changes.
And how do you experience joy now in your life? Like joy and fulfillment, and because that's really, what I love to talk about is,
Yeah.
we can go all through all these things, and when we start to experience the joy again in our lives and have that be our focus, tell me like some of the ways that you do that.
Oh, some of the ways I do that is just being in gratitude when I wake up. Um, there were so many times where that was not an assurance.
Sure, sure.
And, for all of us, we never know. We never know what's going to take us. So I
Mm,
live in joy when my eyes open and my foot touches the floor because I know how close I came to not having this day.
sure.
And I love to face the day with a new start, with a new beginning. I live in Colorado, I live in Denver, so we get over 300 days of sunshine a year. So most of the time my day starts with the sun and it's beautiful and I get beautiful blue skies and I get to see 150 miles of mountain range from my
Oh, that's
neighborhood.
just gives me
So
goosebumps thinking about it.
so
Yeah,
if I'm ever down, I just can go down to the end of the street and turn to the west and see
the
God's work.
creation.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
I was
I
reading
love,
your sign behind
yeah.
you.
Oh, yeah.
And I was maybe you could read that because they can't see it. So
Okay. Yeah, this was a gift from Lydia, my bestie, my roomie. It says, think positively, learn actively, play more, be yourself, smile always, love passionately, live freely, work hard, shine bright, dream big, relax often, and enjoy yourself.
yeah, now how about that for words of wisdom? Um, Linda, if our guests wanted to connect with you, can you just please share with them how they can find you?
They can find me on Facebook. My business is called Living Life's Journey. You can reach me through that page. You can email me at linda@lindamariewilson.com, or you can check out my website, lindamariewilson.com.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Secret Keepers podcast and sharing all of your stories, all your life events with us. And it's so wonderful to see you thriving in your life.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to come on and share. I
You're
appreciate it.
welcome.
This is wonderful work you're doing, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for joining the Secret Keepers podcast.
Thank you for joining the Secret Keepers podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please give us a like and follow so we can invite you back. And if you just want more, visit CorrineZuleger.com. Remember, you're not alone.